Hello, it's Romanosky from Calgary, Canada, shooting from the Lugnuts facility. And what we have behind me here is an example of the iconic 70s and 80s Mercedes Benz Roadster. This is a 450 SL from 1979. So it is an example of the R107, which was the family of two-seat convertibles and four-seat coupes, the R107 and C107. They came out in 1972 and they were in production for 18 years, only finally ending in 1989. They went through some revisions over that time, of course, but they didn't actually really change that much from beginning to end. So this video is a preview for an online auction. It's broken into sections. There's a table of contents, so you can skip forward if you like. You don't necessarily have to digest it in one sitting. We'll start with a brief history of the R107. We'll then go and do a walk around of this car, the interior, exterior, interior, under the hood, and also underneath the car, because we put the car on the hoist. We have a paint meter, so we can do a paint depth report showing that this example has original paint. And then finally we can go into the documentation and provenance of this car. We'll end it up with a cold start and a driving video. So these videos take anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. And the objective isn't to generate likes or increase subscribers, although I'm happy to do that too. But the objective is to impart the greatest degree of confidence for somebody buying this car online who would then be sending a significant amount of money to somebody they don't know for a car they haven't seen, and maybe in a different country or continent. And that's why my videos are an hour long, because I like to go through every square inch of the car and even give you a more detailed presentation than you would if you came to see the car live, because we have access to the hoists and so forth, and we can cram all that into 1 hour, whereas you'd never be able to do that if you just visited the showroom, though you're welcome to do that too. Okay, so let's start with the section, generally speaking, on the R107, C107, and maybe what to look for when buying one of these cars. Okay, so this is an example of the R107. It came out in 1972 worldwide. In North America, the first year, 72, we got a 350 SL, even though it had a 4.5 liter engine in it. The next year, they rebadged it as a 450 SL. The initial cars had hubcaps, Euro bumpers, and then that was changed to North American spec, I believe, for 1974. And then we have I think we have they're called the bunt, I guess, bunt, 14-inch alloy wheels. And these were on all the Mercedes virtually from the 70s as an option, light alloy aluminum wheels, okay? Other than that, visually, the car didn't really change that much until 1986, when it became a 560 SL and it got different wheels, a third brake light, and some other subtle changes. But otherwise, the car has been remarkably similar to the very first version in 1972. The changes the car went through, we have the 4.5 liter engine that goes up to 1980. And this is an example of that. And then for 1981, there was a new family of aluminum engines. Fuel economy was more of a consideration, and so they were fairly drastically downsized, and this became a 380 SL. Horsepower went from 180 or 190 all the way down to 150. And it wasn't until 1986 that this new family of aluminum engines, starting with the 380 SL, became a 560 SL, and it kind of got its performance back. Okay, so we have the 4.5 liter engine with a cast iron block, which this is, from 72 to 79, or from 72 to 80. And then we have the 380 SL, an all aluminum engine for 81 to 85, and then the 560 engine from 86 to 89. Then the car is replaced by this car up there, which we call the 129, and that was 1990 to 2002. They made about 300,000 107s, the R107 Roadster and the C107 Coupe, and it's about a 75%, 25% split, and didn't make the Coupe for 82 to 89, whereas they made the Roadster during the whole time. So the Roadsters are quite a bit more plentiful than the Coupes are. Since they are so plentiful, and even, you know, the newest one is 35 years old, there is a huge difference in condition. Surprisingly, there's not that much difference in price. You can look at advertised 450 SLs for $10,000 or $15,000, which are completely hopeless basket cases that can never be reconditioned with any kind of a budget, that are now just parts cars. And you can find, you know, really nice cars for less than double that. But it would take $200,000 to make a bad car into a good car. So these cars, with every restoration now, you know, starting at $100,000 or $150,000, it would never make sense to buy a 107 and try to restore it unless it was one of the super rare variants. So there's so many cars out there. If you're looking for a 107, the saying, you know, buy the best one that you can afford, holds true, you know, more than virtually any other car, because you cannot make a bad car into a good car for any reasonable amount of money. You should really look for a good car in the first place. Now happily for me, and all of us here at Lugnuts, this is one of those cars, because in a nutshell, it is a extremely well-preserved car with original paint and no corrosion and low mileage and an original interior. Okay, so all of those combinations don't happen very often. The mileage is under 80,000 kilometers, and we have this documented from new, and later in the video we'll go through all the service records and so on. So 50,000 miles, 80,000 kilometers from new. We can go through it with a paint meter, and we can show you that it's got the original paint depth throughout. When the car was brand new, it was sent to this undercoating shop who very liberally coated it with black tar and then sprayed it with oil. It was done when the car was brand new, probably right from the dealer. When we look underneath the car, which we'll see later, we can just see that it's just black everywhere. Normally, that would be a concern for a buyer, thinking that a new application of black undercoat was sprayed over rusty metal to conceal you know, some nasty bits underneath the car that the seller didn't want you to see. As I demonstrate in the video later, walking underneath the car, and then show you with the warranty certificate I have for the undercoating from 1979, that isn't the case here. So in fact, it's not really a negative, because what that did accomplish is coated everything so well, again, not just with the undercoat, but with a layer of oil on top of that, that the undercarriage is completely unrusty. Okay, so we have it's a Canadian car, fully documented from new, always in Nova Scotia until 2020, with all the stamped books, which is rare, with original paint, unrusty, and with a beautiful original interior. So it doesn't actually get much better than that. It checks, you know, all of the important boxes. So we'll continue with the video, and we'll start with the exterior walk around, and then we'll show you all the panels and do the paint meter report. I guess we'll start with the bumpers. The first thing you'd notice is that, you know, the corners are a little bit vulnerable, so sometimes the corners get scraped up and the rubber damaged. Also, you know, the rubber can fade and crack and so forth. So we've got perfectly straight rubber pieces. We don't have any evidence of any scuffing on the overriders and the bumpers. You know, and we didn't treat them with any chemicals or anything like that. And so they're still, you know, a nice, you know, dark, still black, and they haven't faded to gray. So that tells me right away that the car has been out of the sun. Actually, the chrome will start to oxidize, and you'll get like a white haze on it, and then it'll start to pit, and then it'll start to rust. So this chrome is in beautiful shape. And it's got, you know, we can see maybe some really light scratching, but we don't see any pitting, and we don't see any oxidation. The black plastic grille, again, that will also turn gray after a while, and it's still a nice black. And again, there's no pitting or oxidation on any of these chrome pieces. These, I always look at the fasteners, because they're almost the first things to rust, and they look almost like brand new. Like it almost looks like somebody took it apart and just put it back together, but that's not the case. And there's a little screw here in the corner too. I look at this one, because you can just see it in that little hole right there, and often those are like totally brown and don't come out. All right, and then the plastic for the lights, again, if it's in the sun, they'll fade and they'll craze. And these fog lights are actually fairly vulnerable for rock chips. So looking at the front of the car, you know, we look at the black plastic, we look at the chrome and the glass and the fasteners, and it's all excellent. So looking at the front of the car, I really don't know how you would expect a 45-year-old car to look any better than this. And that is one of the reasons why I like 70s and 80s Mercedes so much, is because of the quality of manufacture and the quality of the materials and the quality of the finish is such that if you look after it, these cars can look virtually brand new decades later. And this is an example of that. The car's 45 years old, and you know, there's new cars that are 5 years old that don't stand up this well. Okay, so that's the whole front of the car. These are worth a mention because you can't get silver arms anymore. At least last time I tried, I couldn't, and they look kind of funny when they're black. So it's got the original wiper arms, and even the rubber for the wiper blades is still supple, and the windshield squirters are still in place. A lot of times that grommet cracks and falls off. You know, if the car doesn't have its original windshield, and this one has a Mercedes Benz windshield, if it gets replaced, sometimes these chrome pieces don't go on that well, or the guy installing them wasn't patient enough or hadn't done the car, and they're a bit of a mess. And then what can happen is water gets underneath, and then it starts to rust. So having a car with its original windshield in it is a big plus, because there can be problems when the windshields are replaced, especially for, like, you know, a cheap aftermarket windshield with somebody who's not familiar with doing it on this car and trying to do it for the first time. Okay, so all that's in place, and it doesn't look like it's been ever mucked around with, because then you'll see evidence of scratching on the windscreen surround. I'll look down the side of the car, and these rub strips obviously are there for a reason, and they can get damaged, and they're pretty fussy in the way that they're attached, and there's screws on the back of them that can rust, and these can bend. So they're actually, once you take them off, they're really tough to put back on properly. So if the car's had any kind of paint work where it's required to take those off, often the fit isn't right, they don't line up properly, they're bented or dented or whatever. So I look at those, and they're expensive to buy new. So all of those are nice on this car. Door handle looks good. I look around the door handle. If somebody had rings and stuff like that, I wasn't that careful. Often there's a lot of scratching, and there isn't on the car. Going around the back, the power aerial does work. I'll verify that, but I believe I noticed it go up and down. The rear bumper is also, looks like it's never been touched. There's this black valance piece that still has good color on it. There's no chunks taken out of the rubber, and the chrome trim again just has some very light scratching, as does the trim for the trunk here. None of this looks like it's ever been touched, and again, it's got uniform, very light scratching. Again, the lights look new. There's no fading. This car just was, I know this car was just never left out in the sun, and probably never driven in the rain either. Okay, so then again, this corner, there's no scuffs or scrapes there. The lights are in good shape. We've got all the original tags in the fuel filler area, and I love it. It says it increased pressure for driving over 160 kilometers an hour, or something like that, or over 175 kilometers an hour. You should increase the pressure. This car is a Canadian market car. It came and still has the catalytic converter. Okay, so unleaded gas. And again, the same thing on this side. Door handle's nice, window trim is nice, and the side moldings are all undamaged, completely straight, and fit properly. On a car like this, we also expect that all the door gaps are even, because it doesn't look like anything's ever been apart, and it's an original paint car, and so you know that the door is just going to shut like it did. Now, if it was in an accident and it was repaired, it just wouldn't do that, and often it wouldn't have all these correct gaps, and these lines wouldn't line up the same. Okay, so that's something else I look for on a 107. And we look down the flanks. There's a few really subtle door dings. Really not noticeable unless you do exactly this. You can't even really see them. But they live in this area. I'm not sure the photograph. Okay, so try to get those in the photograph. And those would come out very easily with paintless dent removal. They're in the center of the panel, and they're very shallow. So that just needs a few hours worth of work with somebody who knows what they're doing, and those can come out. There's no other scratches. So I see one here. You can get that. And then there's a few on this panel here. You can try to pick those up. Front fenders look excellent. No marks, scratches. Let's just look down the flanks and see. Well, I don't see anything on the driver's side. So maybe this car parked next to somebody who wasn't as careful. And I don't see anything at all on this side of the car. It looks perfect to me. I will point out this. There is a scratch in the back here. That's from the hardtop. It's a little bit of a job to lift it off cleanly. And if you're not careful or don't lay a towel down, it can scrape. So that happened on this side. And this is very common. And there's another little mark there. And then the pin for the hardtop goes in there. So if you don't get that right, you'll scratch it there. So there's a few marks from taking the hardtop on and off, which is normal. Okay, so we'll look at the wheels. These are the original 14-inch bunt alloy wheels. And after 45 years, you know, some of the coating is coming off, but there's no rash on it. And those could be refinished easily enough. The tires, the Bridgestone, so thankfully they're not just cheap, no-name tires, but they look old. I'm not sure. I tried to pick a date code, but it wasn't conclusive. I think they're 10 years old or more, so they could be replaced. They do make these wheels new reproduction in 15 and 16-inch diameters. And then that opens up a lot of scope for different kind of tires. So if you wanted this look, but wanted a lower profile tire, there's some good aftermarket solutions. I bought a pair of 16-inch versions of that for another SL, and I was actually pretty happy with them. And then they took 225/50 tires, and these are, what are these? 205/70 14s, I think. So that's a tough tire to get. It's shared only with the original Ferrari 308 and the front of a Lamborghini Countach Periscopa. So it's not the easiest tire to find. And if you get proper speed rated tires, they are expensive. Anyway, let's go look at all four of the wheels. Again, sort of uniform finish compared to the front, and there's no curb rash. And the same with that. And the front. So there's no curb rash at all. And you know, when you get a 14-inch tire with a really tall sidewall, you have to hit a curb pretty hard to get the curb rash. Now there is an unused spare. I know there is that because, see, the car was covered. If I go in here, we can see what the original finish was. Now, it wouldn't be too hard just to respray them silver, the ones that are on the car, and that's easy enough to do. And then you could have 5 matching one. Here's an example of the original tire, 205/70. Interesting that that's an HR rated tire, not a VR rated tire, and it's a XVS, Michelin XVX. Okay, and let's just get a shot of that, which is the bottom of the spare tire. Well, it looks like it still has the factory Cosmoline in there. And obviously there's no rust. So we'll show you that, and maybe take a picture of that too. Okay, so that shows what's in the trunk area. Don't have a tool roll, although I'm pretty sure it's just those red ones, which are, well, it probably wouldn't be more than $50 on eBay to get one. And so we'll tighten that down. And we have the battery, and we have the correct hold down for the battery. And let's see, it's a Napa battery that looks recent. Okay, so that's where that is, and then the jack is then secured in the corner there as well. Okay. Okay, so I've called this car for original paint, and I can just go through and verify that. This paint meter is set up in micrometers. Factory paint depth, you know, on any new car really, is between about 100 and 200 micrometers. That's between 1/10 and 1/5 of a millimeter. And so these Mercedes I expected in the low to mid 100 micrometer range. And I can call these numbers out. 127, 131, 127, 118, 159, 127. Do the hood. 148, 146, 137, 147, 129, 132, 169, 103, 111, 126, 133, 128, 101, 121, 127, 151. 120, 142, 174, 146, 140. We'll do this side of the car. 148, 126, 121, 164, 153, 93, 123, 108, 136. Okay, so it doesn't get any better than that. That is exactly what you want to see when you look at an old Mercedes. So under the hood, we can start with the data plate, and then you know, it's got the option codes in it, and should have the original color of 735. We've got the body stamping and the emission control information. So all those labels haven't been removed. Now, a note about this. This is the undercoating that you'll also see when I do the undercarriage video that was liberally applied. It doesn't look very nice, but was affected. Let me show you the warranty I have for that. So this is from Superior Rust Proving Service for a 79 450 SL in September of 1979. And that's in Scarborough, Ontario. So, you know, that's in the Rust Belt in Ontario. And so I can only presume that the car was shipped to one of these places that just wanted to make sure your 70s cars didn't rust. And most of the cars on the road were North American. They didn't have galvanized or any body protection at all. There was no galvanized metal. And so they used a really, really aggressive rust proofing technique, which is spraying on this undercoat and then coating it all with oil. So it doesn't look very nice, but it has protected the body. At least they aimed reasonably well. You know, all the interior bits on this should be silver, and they're black, so you can see where they've just sort of sprayed this everywhere. So this is just an engine compartment. It's original. It's never been, it doesn't look like it's ever had any real invasive work to it at all. I know the car did get a new water pump, so that was new. And we can go through the maintenance records. And the fuel system got some attention: fuel pump, fuel filter, water pump, thermostat, and some other items. But it looks like this engine bay basically hasn't been touched and just given normal servicing all its life, okay? Which is exactly what you want. What you don't want is, you know, the car being serviced on a budget from people who aren't familiar with the cars. And then what you see is, like if we look down here, you know, most independents aren't going to have, you know, route the spark plug wires in this way, and we can see that it's sheathed, and we have all the original sort of clips everywhere. And what this means is that everything's routed properly, and if somebody who doesn't, not familiar with the cars gets in there, what you see is all the wires are everywhere, and nothing's routed. And then the danger is that you break some of these vacuum lines and cause vacuum leaks and other kind of engine problems and so on. So what you really want to see is a car that doesn't look like it's been really touched by anybody. And this is an example of that. Even the hood pad is in decent shape. Usually those start crumbling, and this possibly could be a replacement. But anyway, it's in nice shape. There should also be a pad underneath here, and well, you can see, yeah, you can see this is the original stuff, which just crumbles. You can just see that, right? It just comes off, right? You just have to touch it, and it comes off. So this would be a replacement pad. Nobody did these pieces, so that is something that that you could do. The routing for the headlamp washers looks good, and everything else looks good. The one piece that you probably don't want to see in this car is the original climate control servo, which is what this is, and these all fail. And it's a Chrysler system, fairly complex, vacuum operated, and this is the servo, which has all the vacuum lines that come in the front or the top, and then all the, if you can get a close-up of that, all the hoses which control the flow of hot water and so on at the bottom, and then a bunch of gears and so on in the middle. And this housing, which is plastic, cracks, and then the water contaminates the gears, and it all seizes up and it doesn't work. So the climate control, so this car, it doesn't work either. None of them work, unless this has been replaced. This car blows cold air all the time, and it, for whatever reason, it doesn't blow, or it doesn't have heat. The climate control in the dash works, and you can hear the various vents opening and closing, but we believe this unit has failed. I just replaced it on a 77 450 SLC, and there were two options. One of them was to rebuild this one, and one of them is to replace the whole thing with a solid state unit, and that's what I did, and I think it was $600 US for the part, and actually Aidan and I put it in ourselves. It wasn't that hard, and then it worked fine. But these units always fail. And this car is no exception. In Europe, they had manual climate control and no AC, but for North America, they wanted fully automatic climate control with AC, so they adopted this system from Chrysler, and it just wasn't that durable. Okay. So also under the hood, we can look at sort of the bottom of the chrome for the grill, and it's all excellent. And then we can look in and see some of the fasteners and so on in with the radiator fan, and everything looks really good under there. Okay. And getting in the car, the seats are still very comfortable. The key things in the interior of a 107 are, is the dash cracked or not, and is the wood faded and cracked. Getting this dash out isn't easy. There are no new parts. You can send it away to Just Dashes for $2,500 US, plus the shipping, and then install it. So it becomes like a $5,000 job to redo the dash in it. So getting a 107 that doesn't have a dash crack is a major advantage. With many cars, when they do have dash cracks, for $100, you can buy a really cheap cover that in the photographs almost looks original, but when you touch it, it's just immediately obvious that it's a cheap piece of hard plastic, not the soft touch vinyl that this is. So you want to make sure that if you're looking for a 107, that you at least figure out if it's got a cap for the dash or it's the original dash. And this one, again, is in beautiful shape and is uncracked. Also, the wood is still dark. If the car is left out in the sun, the wood fades, okay? And then it starts, you get hairline cracks in all the veneer. And so this wood is in beautiful shape. It's dark and there's no cracks. The interior of this car is really quite fabulous. And again, along with the you know, the headlights that aren't faded, the glass and plastic that isn't faded, the interior isn't faded as well. And you know, that isn't a surprise. You know, with a car like this that probably went to a very good home in Nova Scotia, was garaged its entire life, and then in Nova Scotia, of course, it's right on the ocean and it's not that sunny. So it just wouldn't have had a lot of sun exposure, and that shows looking at it. The odometer shows 79,749 kilometers, and we have the documentation to support that. We have the original Becker Mexico radio cassette deck that still works. And this is the fully automatic climate control system. And it does, when you hit these buttons, you do hear the valves change. It's just that the climate control servo, which controls the flow of hot water, has failed, like I mentioned earlier. Okay. Otherwise, in the interior, I can't really fault it. I guess the headrests are. There is some padding in there that looks like it's a little dry, and they fall down a little bit. So if you wanted to get really picky about it, the headrests you know, could use a little bit of refurbishment, but they stay up and out of the way and do their job. We do still have the original, which comes in this first aid kit, and it's still well stocked. Okay. So that goes in there. And the rear parcel shelf still looks in nice shape. Okay. So interior is beautiful. The other thing that we can look for is these are plastic kind of covers for the hinge mechanism and the seat, and they often go missing, or the clips on the back of them break and so on. So they're still in nice shape. And we can look at the passenger sill. You know, this can get cut up and this can get scratched and so on, and it's still in excellent shape. Okay. If the door panels come off, it's pretty hard to get them on back perfectly, and they can be loose, and you can generally tell if somebody's been in there. And this car, you know, everything looks like it's just never been touched. Okay. We can look at the striker. You know, if the door has any alignment issues, often we'll see different scraping that goes around the hinge, or chafing on the paint. And if a car has had body work or so on and the door refitted, often there'll be signs that everything's not quite right there, and that's not the case with this car. Okay. Again, looking at the driver's door striker, there is no, and the door shut. There's no scraped paint. There's no indication that anything was out of alignment. The sill is in nice shape. The door card's in nice shape. There's nothing that's out of place there. And as we've become accustomed to with MB Techs, it looks basically perfect. The plastic trim on the seats is still all intact. The carpets look in nice shape. We can get a shot in the footwell alignment. We have all the original stickers. We can get a shot of that. The one with the Canadian flag shows it's a Canadian car, and then those are the other manufacturer stickers. And it does show the date of manufacture on there as 5th month of 1979. Okay. Looking at this soft top, I believe it has to be a new top. I don't think this could be the original top. So I'm going to assume it's been replaced. And where these start to go is they will pinch this area in here, and eventually that, you can see it starting a little bit. Eventually that will crack the plastic and cause a tear, and then you have to replace this plastic window. But we can see we only have really slight evidence that it's been folded, and there's no evidence of any crack starting. If you're really careful when you lower this and you put a radius in it, you can avoid that. But you have to. It's a bit of an art to fold it correctly so they don't crease there. And if we could go to the other side, we can see the same thing. This one's doing a little bit better, but this just requires some care when you fold the soft top. Weather stripping can fail, and we can see that, you know, in this area it's getting chewed up. It's rubber, and then it's kind of coated with this fabric. And this often really deteriorates, and these pieces come adrift from the door. And this actually is still in pretty good shape, okay? And the weather stripping there isn't easy to put on properly. And we see, you know, a little bit, again, of this tearing or this chafing of the fabric cover of the rubber. And that's original, and it's still in actually reasonable shape. You probably wouldn't go in there and try to replace it, because it's really hard to get it to sit properly and then to seal the wheel properly like it did when it was new. So I'd definitely leave that alone. Okay, so let's take a look at the undercarriage of this 450 SL. We can see immediately that it has been undercoated quite some time ago, but you can see the what's left of it. But basically, this whole thing, all the fender wells, all the floors, and so on, not the exhaust, thankfully, but it's all been completely undercoated. In addition to that, we have the car on the hoist right now, and we have just pressure washed it, and what we took off from the underside was a coating of fresh oil. Now, this oil was up in every cavity in the rear. It was not from an oil leak that had blown over the car. So this car was given like a fairly, well, let's just call it a thorough, somewhat crude, but incredibly thorough undercoat job, where it was black undercoat was sprayed in it, and then it was sprayed with basically what looked like 20 weight oil everywhere. Okay, so we finally got so we cleaned up the bottom of the car, which was a little bit messy, but what it's left with is really perfectly preserved metal. And so I know that, I mean, any collector who sees a bunch of thick undercoat on the bottom of the car is just going to assume that it's a cheap job, you know, covering up a bunch of rust done by, you know, the dealers so that they could make the bottom of the car look better in preparation for sale. That's not what's happened here. This undercoat looks like it was done in Nova Scotia. It looks like it's 20 or so years old, and it looks like it did its job. It was just done when, you know, that's what you did to 70s and 80s cars, you know, especially if they were driven out east. Now, what I want to emphasize with this car is that there's no corrosion underneath. And so let's go through that. I mean, where you start to see the corrosion is, you know, in these panels here. This is fairly thin sheet metal, and you see it, you see soft metal there in this valence, you know, this rear valence here. You know, you'll see soft metal there if the car is rusty. You'll see fasteners that have started to rust, and you won't be able to get them off, okay? But everything that I've looked at with this car in every little corner suggests, like, not a really, you know, the undercoat went on over some dirt and stuff like that in some places. So it's definitely not pretty, but what it's done is it's protected, you know, all of the metal. And, you know, if I go anywhere in this car and I look for the original fasteners and so on, what I see is everything that is, you know, unrusty. Like even in areas like, you know, if you wanted to get, you know, that screw out, you know, well, I can tell immediately that that'll come out. There's a shield that lives right there, and some bolts that I've seen on other cars, even ones that were really nice, where like you have no hope of getting that thing out without breaking it. And in this car, that just isn't the case. All these fasteners look good, and we can look under the front bumper again. All these areas are really susceptible to corrosion, and if the car was rusty, you would see it here. You would see these bolts all rusty, and it's just not the case. Now, the other place you'll see rust on these cars is, that's the factory jacking point. This is where you should jack the car, but often, the car will get jacked on these rails, and the undercoating will peel off, and then it'll start to rust. I mean, we can see in this area here where there's been a jacking pad before, and where it's rubbed the coating off, but there's no rust underneath there. Okay, that's solid metal, so there's just nothing that's rusty along the floor pans or the sill, anywhere on the car, or like I said, any of the fasteners. And again, particularly they'll go first, in these rear valence areas, in between, in the behind the wheel wells. Okay, so hopefully I can adequately show that, and give you the confidence that this is basically a rust-free car. And as well, we can show you that it has original paint depth on the top side as well. So it's a car with a completely, basically, I'm calling it for a corrosion-free body shell, and accident-free, and original paint. So I'll give you a slow pan of the underside so you can see it. But it may not look pretty, but all that undercoat and oil and that was sprayed underneath this car has done its job. And the other thing you'll see is, if the car is rusty, the exhaust system will be the first thing to go as well. But what you'll see is a car that is actually in really nice shape underneath. Original Mercedes muffler, and all the original panels. So you may not want to get a mirror and put it under the car when you display it at a Mercedes concourse, but if what you're looking for is just a car that's been well preserved, you could do a lot worse than this 450 SL. On top of it, I've laid all of the what comes with the car, in terms of all what's in the manual and books and Mercedes Benz literature, service records, etc. So let's take a look at the maintenance booklet. Now, normally these are filled out for the first few years, and then they go blank. So we've got the production card of the car, and we see the 735. I think it's Astral Silver, if I'm not mistaken. And the 818 would be the blue MB-Tex interior. Came standard with Michelin car tires, and then we have the chassis number and the engine number. We pick it up. Now, in Halifax in '79, I'm not even sure they had a Mercedes Benz dealer. So we have this car being serviced in Toronto, and we can see it starts at 1,648 kilometers, and 10,000 kilometers, 14,000 kilometers, 12,000 kilometers, 13,000 kilometers, 18,000 kilometers. Didn't have the mileage on that one, but then we go to 39,000 kilometers. Now we're in the late 80s, and I guess this was in Florida. So this person must have been a snowbird and had a place in Florida. Drove it down there. Counts for a lot of the mileage, and then we get to 50,000 kilometers, 60,000 kilometers, 64,000 kilometers. 72. Now we're in 1992. 72,000. Well, it only has 79,000 kilometers now. So in 30 years, it's only gone like 7,000 kilometers. But we still see lots of services. So 72K, 73K, and 73K, 74K, 75K, 75K. And that takes us up to 2010. So that is unusual. Most of these times the books would give up long before that. So this is a maintenance booklet from new to 2010 with Mercedes Benz dealers. And then the next record I have is an inspection report, Zad's Auto Sales in 2015, and the car has how many kilometers on it? 75,600. So, you know, from 2010 to 2015, it's picked up, well, no kilometers, right? Because it was, what was the last mileage there? It was still 75 then, wasn't it? Yeah, it was 75,340 in 2010, and it's 75,602, so it went 300 kilometers in 5 years, and then I've got a shipping invoice from the current owner, who then buys it in Halifax, and the car, this is now 2020, and the car has 77,000 kilometers on it. So from 2015 to 2020, it went 2,200 kilometers. The car is bought, then it's shipped to Calgary. And then I have it picked up with the service records from the current owner at some independent Calgary repair shops. And we've got oil changes in 2021. I'm trying to get the mileage here. At 78,778 kilometers. So we have an oil service there. And that's 2021. And then in 2023, I have that right? It has 79,572 kilometers on it, and that's a $3,000 bill. And we have oil, we have a adjustment for the hardtop, we have water pump, fuel filter, fuel pump, and that's a $3,000 bill from Regal. And then in 2024, it goes to Continental, and I have a $2,000 bill, and that is steering shaft coupler worn out, left rear brake caliper seized up, so it gets some attention to the brakes. It gets shifter bushings that are replaced, and a suspension stabilizer bar link. Let's just look at that braking system here. It says the brakes went soft. Left rear brake caliper seized up. Right front brakes uneven wear. 3 millimeters inside, 5 millimeters outside. Recommend replace front and rear brakes and left rear brake caliper. Flush brake fluid. And that's all the documentation that goes with the car, plus the hardtop. And then we have the car cover. Okay, in summary, there's a lot of really strong pluses with this car. This is one of the best 107s I've ever come across. So to name these sort of boxes, which I think are important, they would be beyond a doubt. The first thing is the lack of corrosion. A rusty 107 is like a parts car. It's not even worth starting to try to fix those. So it's absolutely crucial to, when you're shopping for a 107, to look for a car with no corrosion or as little corrosion as possible. So this is that car. We have the original body shell, original panels, original paint. Nothing's been rusted on top of the car or underneath the car. When it was new, the chassis was aggressively sprayed with an undercoat and then an oil coating on top of that, which looks kind of terrible, but has really protected the car. Okay, so the first box is it rusty, or is there any corrosion underneath the car? And it's no. There's been no accidents and no body repair, and that's another huge plus. It's never been left out in the sun, so the plastic lights and so on are clear and bright, and the wood hasn't been faded, and the interior hasn't been dried out, and crucially, the dash hasn't been cracked. So that's another huge plus. We have a car with really low mileage, under 80,000 kilometers, which is very low for any 45-year-old car. Another huge plus. We've got it fully documented with all the maintenance that's been done to it virtually throughout the 45 years life of the car. We're only missing, we don't know a lot about what happened to the car in 2,000 kilometers from 2010 to 2020. Presumably it's just in storage, okay? So we have almost a complete history file for the car. Which is again a major plus. We have no evidence that anybody's been into the car who didn't know what they were doing. So all the routing for all the vacuum lines and spark plug wires and so on is factory, and that's another huge plus. We have a beautiful soft top where the windows aren't cracked and there's no chafing of the fabric, and we have an unmodified car with its original radio, original wheels, etc. So I don't know what more you could ask for. It's had some recent service on the car, and it's about as good a 1979 450 SL as you will ever be likely to find. I mean, you could get this car with, there are cars out there with much lower mileage, but then they're very expensive. So this is like the perfect 107 to get in and drive, where you're not going to devalue it by putting it on another 10,000 kilometers on the car. So you can enjoy the car, but you can enjoy it also knowing that you've selected one of the best preserved 450 SLs anywhere. So with that, it'd be a great addition to anybody's collection, or just a summer driver if you just wanted a affordable, practical, reliable classic car. So with that, Lawrence Romanosky from Calgary, Canada. Please like and subscribe. And if you're interested in this car, bid, because it's going on an online auction.